Hello everyone and welcome back to another tier list video. This time with something new, not divisions, but tanks. And yeah, we already went to my top 5 tank videos at the beginning of the year. But this is a full-on tier list of all the vehicles that are classified as a tank in-game within the tank category. CV tanks, not part of it. Recon tanks, not part of it. IFVs, not part of it. And yeah, we're gonna go over all the tanks, see how efficient they are in the game, how much they play their role well, and yeah, as you can see, all listed up here. So let's start with the French tree here with the AMXs and the AMX 1390 in Berlin Command, which is a rather C tier kind of unit. Now that it is a bit cheaper and it has the fantastic rapid fire autoloader, it can be a bit useful in some categories. Replace IFVs a bit for you as a fire support unit that can kill APCs and so on, but its range and its armor and its lack of an autocannon and so on leave it still somewhat lackluster. So C tier it is. AMX 30 EBG coming in next year, being another C tier unit. It has a really short range on its big HE gun, and the HE gun vehicles, the fire support vehicles, still struggle a bit with a role as well, because they stun well, but the rate of fire is really low, and that is really their big issue. They don't really breach buildings much better than other tanks either at the moment, so C tier it is for the MX-30 EBG. If they change these vehicles so that they do like rocket true damage to buildings, they might come up a bit higher. Currently, it's only C tier here for the AMX-30 EBG. And then we come to the AMX-30B. This is the one that only has heat shells and low range as well. But it still has the autocannon. It's still a fast tank. It's more of an APC IV hunter that also can give good fire support thanks to that autocannon than really a tank versus tank fighting unit, but it's also priced at that category. 85 points, that's still cheaper than the BMP3, and it can give good fire support. It can help out there quite nicely. So AMX-30B here, in B tier, I think is the right spot for it. And then we come to the AMX-30B2, with a bit more frontal armor, but especially AP shells and a long range, and that's an A tier unit here. It has a great firepower against infantry, and it has solid firepower against any kind of vehicle, and it is priced really nicely for that as well, especially as it is also so fast. No stabilizer, the only issue here, but the MX-30B2, an A tier level tank, and I would put the MX-30B2 Brennis in a similar position. Slightly better penetration, slightly better front armor and hit points. So yeah, 10 points better. Absolutely, a slight bit better than that even, I would say. So A tier, slightly higher than the MX-30 for the Brennis version. Centurion is another C tier unit here. It is the AVRE, the HE tank for the British. It is still rather slow, and it also doesn't have the best of guns. It's better than the EBG, as it isn't quite as low range, and it can give fire support from a bit further away, but it's also not that amazing at being tanky and all of that stuff. So yeah, 80 points, but you also have a lot of IFVs in that deck that have them, so you could maybe just use the warriors instead, which are pretty decent at giving fire support. So Centurion, Mark 5 AVRE here in C tier. And then we come to the Challenger Mark 2, which is somewhere between B and C, but more C tier still. It's a heavy boy, but it's the weakest out of the heavy tanks. It has still solid range, solid accuracy, solid frontal armor, solid penetration. Rate of fire and speed are big issues still, and its frontal armor is not as, and penetration are not as impressive as some of the other heavy tanks. And the rate of fire and speed make it so that with the speed, it can't really dodge ATGMs and AT planes and cluster planes that well. And with the rate of fire, it loses in drawn-out fights against other heavy tanks. It got a bit cheaper lately, so it's a bit better there, but it's still not on an amazing spot. Challenger Mark III, B tier tank, has better penetration, has more survivability as well. At that point, it starts to become really solid. The good penetration gun is quite nice. So B tier tank here, even in front of the AMX-30B. The 25-point difference here, you really want to pay between Challenger Mark II and Mark III. So yeah, first UK Armored is solidly happy with that tank. It's a decent one. Same goes for the Chieftain Mark X. They still have the speed issue, they still have the rate of fire issue, but the frontal armor and their penetration are really solidly set as well. So the Mark 10 and Mark 11, they stats-wise they're identical, so they both go here, are quite solid tanks. And then you have the budget version, the Chieftain Mark 9, with slightly lower range and all, and slightly lower frontal armor, which goes into a similar spot as well still though. It's somewhat comparable to the normal T-72, but yeah, it does that job decently. The rate of fire still is an issue, the speed is still an issue for the Chieftains as well, but they do their job as a British tank okay. So yeah, as you can see, the British not with anything too strong here, but they can compete for the most part. Like they're not suffering anymore nowadays. Then we come to the ERC-90 Sagai, which have gone up in price quite a bit. Before they were S-tier tanks, now they are only A-tier tanks. But they are fast, they have great range, they are cheap, like quite cheap, and they still have good stealth. So yeah, they can go around, zoom around, hide, shoot, zoom around. And that's exactly the annoying kind of playstyle that you want to have in 11th, and also a really good vehicle hunter. Obviously not there for drawn-out fights, but they can run away anyways. So that is fine. And then we come to the vehicle that is not an IV, because it can't really transport units anymore. So Eugen was like, okay, let's classify it as a tank. It maybe should be classified as an IV. It would be really terrible there still. It is absolutely terrible here. The FV 432 Rarden, completely overpriced, has horrible armor for a 40-point vehicle, and yeah, the Rarden is okay as a gun, but you should not use these guys in Berlin Command at all, even if you're desperate for an autocannon. This vehicle is not it. So D tier here for that little British unit from Berlin Command. Now we come to the Leo 1s, and we start with the Leo 1A1, which is a better tank killer than the AMX-30B, but it's still easily killed, and it is way worse as an infantry support vehicle, because it only has the 7mm MGs. Like, that's an issue with the British tanks as well, and then the Leo 1A1 also doesn't have that much HE in its main gun, so and low range, like the AMX-30B, so B tier it is, because it's still affordable. Like, the 80 points is a really aggressively marked price point here. It's in the range of a lot of IVs still, so that part is great, but it's also, yeah, low range main gun, and really vulnerable frontal armor, and it can not efficiently kill infantry compared to other tanks, even if it gets closer. Leo 1A5 with the better range is a B tier tank. If you vet it up, it can be really good. It's high-end B tier in my eyes, but it's still vulnerable to the issues. It's not as fast as some Leo 2s, so it can't run away and zoom around as much as those. Like the Leo 1A1s and 1A5s, they look like they should be super fast. They're actually only mid-tier there, and with their armor and with their lack of anti-infantry stopping power, they are decent for the price, but they are only decent here. High B tier for the Leo 1A5. Great for sniping IFVs and APCs on long range. Not so great at the other jobs. Can be annoying against other tanks, but lacks a bit of frontal armor to really be annoying to the heavy ones as well. So yeah, B tier here. Leo 23 here now. Another A tier tank. It is fantastic at, I would actually put it here. It's fantastic at hunting down enemy tanks, and it does that really well with its high speed, with its high accuracy, with its high penetration gun. It isn't great at killing infantry for its price point, because it doesn't have those MGs. Still has a decent rate of fire on the main gun, so it can do okay there. And its side armor and frontal armor both a bit lackluster, especially the side armor, leaving it vulnerable to a lot of one-shot situations from the side, as the only heavy tank that with such a low side armor of 6. So it gets one-shot by Conquerors, for example. So you have to be careful around it, but if you play it correctly, it's an absolutely fantastic tank. That's why it's S tier here, A tier here, and its brethren, the Leo 2A4, is an S tier tank. Like the extra penetration and the extra frontal armor playing such a magnificent role, and it's such a fast hunting tank that can beat any enemy tank as on tank fight and cost efficiency, because it doesn't pay extra for extra MGs, it doesn't pay extra for extra side armor. And yeah, that makes it the perfect tank hunter tank. And it is an S tier tank. Leo 2A4 at the moment, super efficient. So yeah, if you play 5th Panzer, use those things to the maximum. 5th Panzer has some other issues, though it's quite strong in general at the moment. And yeah, the Leo 2A4 is one of its big strong points. So yeah, use those guys. Then we come to the National Guard, M1 Abrams. And that currently is only a C tier tank. Yeah, I would put it around the Challenger Mark II. I would actually put it behind it, because you pay quite a lot still for it. It's only 10 points cheaper than the normal M1 Abrams, and it has low veterancy, and it has the massive debuffs and rate of fire and aiming and stress recovery and stress gain from the reservist traits. So for only 10 points, it is a lot worse than the normal M1 Abrams. It still has solid stats, but cost efficiency here is a bit out of bounds. So you have to be really careful of them not getting shot, and even then they're still not that efficient. So yeah, M1 Abrams, the lowest out of the Abrams family. The rest is all pretty strong. The normal M1 Abrams is high-end B tier material. It is fast. It has the 50 cal. It has a decent firepower gun. Still a bit lackluster when it comes to cost efficiency, especially when it comes to survivability against other tanks and ATGMs, thanks to its still somewhat low frontal armor. But it does the job as a tank killer and as a fire support unit decently. And yeah, high-end B tier material here for the normal M1 Abrams. M1A1, efficiency-wise, still an S tier tank here. It is still the king. Got nerfed a bit, but that thing is still so hard to kill. It kills you. It has the 50 cals, so it can shred all the units around you quite nicely as well. Has decent survivability all around, decent speed, so it's a fantastic tank as well. So is its brethren, the M1A1 HA. Yeah, it is a bit slower, but the insane penetration and insane frontal armor still make it so strong, and its firepower all around is fantastic. That high 21 penetration, 22 frontal armor, it's just so hard to kill and does so much damage to anything that it hits. So yeah, M1A1HA is the top dog still. So yeah, price-wise, it is still pretty efficient as well, even though it is so high. So yeah, those things still fantastic. M1IP is a solid A tier tank. That's what keeps 24th around, for example, and same for 101st. It doesn't quite carry them fully, but that thing has good frontal armor, so it is really survivable, and that's a nice thing over the normal M1. And the firepower is still really solid to deal with most threats. Against the heaviest of boys, you struggle a bit. That's why it's only A tier, not S tier, but the M1IP, all around fantastic tank still. Now we come to a bit of the second line units here, where we start with the M48 CGA1, and that's another B tier tank here. It is cheap. It has a 50 cal, the only German unit with a 50 cal on it, and yeah, you can just spam them around. It's not quite as good at killing tanks like the Leo 1A1, for example. It has the disheartened trait, but the firepower for the price is absolutely fair. And I would even put it higher than its brother, because you kind of want to use these like IFVs more so than tanks. You want to use them to kill APCs, you want to use them as fire supporting its infantries. And with the 50 cal, it's way better at that. And it is 10 points cheaper than the M48 A2 GA2, which doesn't have a 50 cal. It has a slightly better gun, but that doesn't matter super much in the fights that you can take with these guys, and they kind of lose against the similar opponents, and you pay extra price for it. So that's not really worth it here in comparison. So only C tier here for the M48 A2 G82. Sheridan, another tank here, another C tier unit. I would put it around here. It is really an overpriced IFV more so. Like, it has a decent HE gun, it has a ATGM somehow, it has an AP penetration that is okay but not great, and yeah, I would even put it here behind these guys currently. Like, you still play them as the 82nd, and 82nd is still a good division, but it's not because of the Sheridans, and they are overpriced at the moment. So yeah, C tier only here for the Sheridan, relatively low C tier at that. And then we come to the M60A3. That, on the other hand, is another B tier unit here. It has solid penetration, solid armor, it has a 50 cal, it can give good fire support. So yeah, it comes around nicely at a decent price point as well. M60A3, solid B tier unit. Not the most amazing tank of all time, but it does its job. It does its job quite well. Cav, another one of these fire support units. The M728 Cav here. Better than the other two, so I would put it above them in C tier. Solid frontal armor, solid stress on the gun and so on. Like, that thing does something with infantry. We see it a good bit more lately in tournament games, so it's for sure not useless, but we have seen better than that. So yeah, it's not an amazing unit that you absolutely want to play. It is playable though. It is playable, but like around ready M1 Abrams is in that you sometimes don't have a different option for it helping you out, and then you use this kind of like an IFV, for example, in 8th Infantry, a division that is fantastic, once more, not because of the Cav. So yeah, it goes around that. BT76B, the recon version is quite solid. This one here is rather not. It is a 40-point unit. It is obviously more like an IFV. The main gun is okay because it has heat, but it doesn't really kill anything one shot, and like not even APC, and it doesn't really deal that much damage against anything else either. Accuracy is pretty terrible. It doesn't have a massive amount of machine guns or anything, so HE value is not that great, and all of that for 40 points, and wasting a tank card on it, not really worth it usually. T-3485, slightly better, because it is cheaper and you get a good amount of them, and they have a bit better fire support and a bit better frontal armor, so they can actually survive a shot or two against lighter vehicles. Can actually deal decently with things with autocannons if they don't have ATGMs on top of the autocannon. So yeah, because they have the frontal armor to bounce that off, but they still don't have that much fire support, and they can't really contest with anything. Obviously, they're a super outdated tank, T-3485. So yeah, it is what it is here, and yeah, a C tier unit at best. T-54 AM on the other side, I kind of like. As a B tier unit because it is so cheap, and it has a decent amount of firepower against infantry with the extra MGs and so on top. It has a super good HE value for a tank like this as well, so it can get really good fire support. It can kill APCs one shot. It can kill IFVs quite decently as well. All of that leaves it at B tier here. You don't want to fight tanks with it, but it is super efficient for 70 points. Like, the 70 points are really the selling point here. T-55A, slightly better still because it can actually deal some damage to tanks. It only costs 10 points more, and for that price point, being able to engage tanks when necessary is worth it. So T-55A here, slightly better at B tier. Still not an amazing tank. Like, it has good frontal armor. That's something like the survivability of both of these vehicles for 70 and 80 points each is fantastic. That's the selling points. You can't really rush enemies, but you can take fights with these guys and draw the enemy out, give some decent fire support, and then move on later. So yeah, T-55 AM2, on the other hand, a bit higher in B tier here. I would put it around the Leo 185. It plays a similar role, long-range sniper unit. But it can also get fire support against infantry. It doesn't quite have the same speed and AP power as the Leo 185. It is a bit more expensive, but this extra survivability and the extra infantry stopping power as an all-around tank play in here quite nicely. So yeah, around here for the T55 AM2. And we go to the T55 AM2B as well. Or yeah, there we go. Let's do that right now. That is an A tier tank. Low end A tier, but it is a fantastic annoyance for the enemy thanks to the ATGMs it got. So those really help you out with pushing the enemy back, and it does all of that for a solid price point. Same goes for the normal T62M here, which also has the ATGM, and that fast flying 2800 meter range ATGM makes it so that the enemy has to be careful when engaging your guys, gets stunned down, gets locked down quite quickly, does damage to any kind of enemy vehicle. So these really make them efficient. Rate of fire on both of these tanks, not that great when actually fighting with their main gun, but outside of that, T62 and T55 AM2B, pretty efficient, pretty solid at that. Survivability is quite decent as well. The normal T62 M1, that's the one without the ATGM. Yeah, is an okay tank as well. Rate of fire is the issue here, similar to the British, if you have to rely on your main gun. So that is the issue there. MD, paying the extra 5 points is actually not really worth it for it. The extra side armor doesn't usually come into play, and paying 5 points extra all the time, not that great. So I would put the MD and the MD1, which are just having the extra cages there on top, slightly behind their comrades, but they are still basically the same. The T55 MV, I actually don't think the loss of frontal armor is worth the extra hit point on this one, and it costs the same as the M version, so it's not quite as survivable against enemy normal AP units. So that's why I would put it here. It's a bit more survivable against things like bombs and so on, but that doesn't really play the big role. And yeah, that's why the MV, still with the long-range ATGM, is solid, but it's not quite as good as the normal M version. And yeah, it's just a mid-tier tank here, doing its job quite decently. So yeah, we will continue in high B tier here with the T64B. Decent frontal armor, good penetration, not so great speed, accuracy is okay, rate of fire thanks to the autoloader is great, and it has an ATGM. It's not the greatest ATGM, so yeah, B tier it is. Can be annoying, is rather cheap, but not the fastest and not the most efficient in those fights. The BV, having the better hit points, having the better ATGM, is an A tier unit, slightly better, for 15 points only. So yeah, BV here is a solid one. And then we come to the West Germans, to the East Germans. And there we start with the T72, which in my eyes is a high-end C tier tank. We don't see it too often because it doesn't have smoke, and that's a big issue. It has solid frontal armor values. It has great penetration values, but it has low range. It can't close in with smoke, and it can't dodge ATGMs with it, and it's not really that fast either. So you have decent stats on the paper that just often just can't be used efficiently, and you pay actually a pretty high price for that. And unless the T55A and AM, which can not smoke either, but they are cheap, they're replaceable. If you lose them, it's annoying. It's not that the end of the world though. The T72, not really priced in that segment where you just can shrug off losing it. So only a C tier unit here. You can use it. It still can work. It's a bit harder, and the other options here are better, with the T72M on the other side being another B tier unit here, and the M1 being a low-range A tier unit. You get too few of them, but great frontal armor, solid penetration, and an autoloader. all of that, making these guys quite solid. Range is an issue, but if you can get in range, if you can get shots off, these guys are nice, and you have the smoke to be playing a bit more secure with these guys. So T-72s, stats-wise, really cost-efficient when it comes to penetration and frontal armor, and the autoloader. So yeah, here we go. Then we come to the T-80B, which is up here in front of the T-64B. Price is rather high, but it's fast. It has a decent-ish ATGM. It has good main gun. Frontal armor, a bit lackluster, but okay still. And yeah, it's just like the T-80BV does most of the things that it does, just better. T-80BV extra the system with the extra hit points and so on, working out a good bit better. And T-80BV is still a fantastic little vehicle. The ATGM is okay, and it does its job quite nice as a all-around tank that can take some shots, can deal out some shots. The autoloader is helpful in all of these tanks, so that is quite big. The T-80BV IZD, I would even put higher here on the beginning of a tier tab, as the extra speed and the better ATGM make it so well to use against any kind of enemy. The 21 penetration of the Agona, meaning that its ATGM hitting actually means that the enemy gets damaged quite badly. So yeah, the T-80BV IZD there doing quite well. T-80U on the other hand is really, really good as well. So the extra frontal armor and stuff helping out. I would put it up in A tier as well. It's really strong with that reflex long range ATGM. It has fantastic penetration. It has solid frontal armor. Compared to its brethren in price, the M1A1HA is still better though. So I would only put it into higher A tier here. We have seen it in the league finals. It played really well there, but it isn't the absolute king of the battlefield right now. It can be super scary though. T-80UD, I would put a bit higher here in the low range of S tier. Still fantastic frontal armor, fantastic ATGM, and yeah, it has that extra survivability and so on. And that thing is just so hard to crack. But yeah, not as cost efficient as the HA. I agree with Yuki Por there when he came in for the interview at the finals that T-80UD and HA should be priced relatively similar. The 20-point difference here, not really worth it. But yeah, T-80UD is still a fantastic tank though. Like on the low tier of S tier, but fantastic ATGM, fantastic main gun with autoloader that helps out quite a bit. And also great protection all around. And then we come to the TO-55s, the last tank remaining here. And I would put these guys into C tier as well, as they can be used. The issue is their flamethrower doesn't really work that well at the moment. You pay extra for it, and then you also lose some MGs here. So TO-55, fantastic little vehicle if you need it, but and in some divisions you only get it and not the normal T-55A, but it doesn't have smoke. It doesn't have the extra MGs, so on mid-range it has less firepower than a normal T-55A. You pay extra for that. You pay extra in availability for it as well. And then the flamethrower is really unreliable when it fires, how much damage it does. So yeah, C tier as a unit that can be used, but is not really that great at it. So yeah, here we end up with the tier list. And yeah, what do you think about it? You can make your own one down below. Maybe share it on the STL Discord and say what you think are the top tanks at the moment. I still think the Leo 2A4 and the M1 family does fantastically, especially the top ends here, T-80Us. Yeah, on their own do really, really well as well. The divisions they're in that's a different question. That's not what we are looking on here, but the T-80UDs and Us make a really good job in 101st and 119th when you bring them around. So, yep, let me know down below. What do you think? Thanks for watching, guys. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye, and have a great day.